And welcome back. As we go ahead and continue our programming journey, today we're going to look at print versus print line. Now we have seen print line statements before. These are what we use to control output, but we're introducing its little friend called print that's going to come into play here as well. So let's start first by using something that we're familiar with, System.out.println. Recall that when we use System.out.println, this sends a statement to the console. For example, System.out.println hello world will output hello world. System.out is part of the Java language, so it's not something that we have to worry about trying to add into our program at any point. It's always there for us. Println, of course, is what's known as a method, and we'll talk more about those later, invoked by System.out object. So don't worry about what methods and stuff are. We're going to start using some of that terminology so we get familiar with it, but right now you don't have to worry about all the nuances for it. Now, the thing you do need to know is that we're always going to end the statement with a semicolon. This is something that we are already familiar with. We've already used these print line statements, and we're going to see the exact same kind of formatting happening here when we look at print in a few minutes. So let's first stay on System.out.println for a minute and look at how our output is kind of manipulated. So one of the things to understand is that the data that's outputted is whatever we place inside those parentheses. And whether that is a string that remember strings of course have to be in quotes, or a variable, we can output those values to the console. We can also of course concatenate strings or variables or some combination thereof and use things like escape characters help format it. And this is whether we're doing like a new line, we're adding in a set of quotation marks, maybe we're adding in a tab. These are the kind of things that we can do here with our output. Now remember, of course, though, if we want to put a space in, you can of course either need to include that as part of our original string, or we can need to concatenate that in separately as its own character. Remember, spaces are not automatically added between variables or strings or whatever you want to kind of join together. Now, we are already familiar with System.out.println, so how does that compare with its little cousin here, System.out.print? Well, with this friend here, it's going to function pretty much exactly the same, except when we look at System.out.println, for example, if we output two or more statements, we use System.out.println to put each of those on its own line. So, for example, using two System.out.println statements, we'll each have the outputs be on new lines of code. So, if I had a System.out.println hello, System.out.println world, hello will come out on one line, world would come out on another. Now, if we use System.out.print, which is our other method we're looking at, you'll see that these are going to be on the same line. So that's the biggest difference here between print and print line. Functionally, they are exactly the same. The only difference is that when we do a print line, every time I call a print line statement, it's automatically going to the next line. And if we look at how the print output actually kind of works here, let's just go ahead and have some example go. Let's say System.out.print A, System.out.print wet, System.out.println bird, System.out.println never flies at night. This is going to output as a wet bird never flies at night. And of course, you know a wet bird is all in one line, but never flies at night is on another. Now, it's very interesting here to point out that the new line doesn't actually start until after the print line statement. So even though this is a print line here, it doesn't start a print line right here of adding a new line after wet. Instead, it's starting that new line after bird. So that's the thing about the way this print line statement is working, is that it's not moving that line down to the next line until it has finished whatever's inside that print line statement. So let's go ahead and look at this now with some actual code to really help give a little bit more context to it. So I'm just going to go ahead in here and let's just add in some strings. So I'm just going to create string str1, and let's just have that equal to hello, and let's do str2, set that equal to world, and str3, and set that equal to universe. All right, so we have three simple strings here, and all I'm going to do first is do a System.out.print of str1, and then I'm just going to make my life easier here. I'm just going to copy this, and let's go ahead and paste this in a few more times here. And I'm just going to go ahead and make this str2. I'm going to change this one str2 and change these second ones here to print line, just so we can see how these are going to be different. Now this should look very similar to what we saw in our example. And so if I run this code, you'll see it will say hello world, hello, and then world down here. All right. Again, because these are the way it's printing this, it doesn't actually move this down to the next line until after it has finished this System.out.print line right here. Now, what would happen if I were to, for example, do a concatenation? So let's just add in here to our str1, str3. We're just going to concatenate that in. And I'm going to do the same thing here with my System.out.print. And if I run that, you'll see that we get pretty much the same thing kind of going. We got hello universe, world, hello universe, world. It, again, doesn't affect anything with concatenation. Now, where it can change things a little bit, I'm actually going to add in a new line character here. So I'm actually going to concatenate in the escape character here for a new line. And I'm going to do that here for str2 with the System.out.print. I'm not going to do any of the other ones just here, because I just want to show what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and run this again. And you'll see now it says hello universe world, hello universe world. And that's because with a System.out.print, it still obeys the laws of escape characters. So if I have a print statement and I want to move that to a new line, I have to, of course, concatenate into that output the new line escape character. Otherwise, it's all going to be on the same line. Now, obviously, having a System.out.print line is a little bit more efficient because I don't have to do the concatenation with whatever I'm joining in here. So there are obviously advantages of having System.out.println. However, there might be times when you only want to print a singular thing rather than a whole line, because maybe you're trying to put multiple outputs on the same line before you move on. This can come in really handy if you're, for example, writing to a text file or something like that, where that could come in handy. Or, if you have a print line statement, obviously that is something we're a little more familiar with and can happen there. But sometimes we only want that print to only be on the same line until we're ready to move on to the next line. And again, that's where things like escape characters could come in handy if we are set on using System.out.print. But ultimately, both of these function the same, except for, again, that minor difference.